Trusting your browser to make promises on this week's Web Byte. Welcome back to Web Byte. Last time, we learned how to make the browser talk to you using speech synthesis. This time, we'll have it make promises to you. Well, promises that can be broken. We'll get to that in a moment. Promises work very much like callbacks do. You set up your callback function and your methods to pass after the function has run. That function can contain variables from the previous method or from the new method that you've just run. Promises differ, however, by how they're chained together, one after the other successively. Let's take a look at some code and find out exactly what that means. Start by creating your global function that will be run on loading the file. Then use strict. Add the variable Ajax as a function using three different variables: URL, onSuccess, and onError. In that new function, create a brand new variable called request and set it as a new XML HTTP request. Then create an event listener for that request. Within there, set if request.readyStatus equals 4 and if request.status is equal to 200. Then check if there's a success and then return the response as a JSON back to that onSuccess callback. That's it. If you have an onError, you can easily pass that through if there is an error or if the status is not 200. Then, after the event listener, add an open, as simple as a get request, and then pass through the URL, as well as request.send to initiate the actual response. And that's it. You just created an Ajax callback function that you can pass a URL to, as well as a successful callback. But what if you need to do a lot of things after you've loaded it? This is your web application after all. It's got to download the JSON file, parse the response, create the elements within your object, possibly create new buttons and interactive elements, as well as set up event listeners. For that, we can look at using promises. It's fairly straightforward and doesn't require much more to do than what we originally have. Take the original function that you've created and add the word promise to the end of it, just for clarification's sake. Then, take the last two variables of the function and remove them. What we're going to do is we're going to return a promise rather than run the code. So before var request, simply add return new promise and then open up parentheses and write function successful request and errored request. These two variables are the different callbacks that can be called for a promise. The first of which being if the promise was successful. The second is if it's errored, or in this case, if the promise was broken. And then, instead of writing a callback function that you passed originally, you write in successful request, as well as an error, you write in errored request. This now tells the promise, on successfully fulfilling this promise, run the successful request, as well as if errored, or request not fulfilled, run the errored request function. There, that was simple enough. A couple new curly braces and a new return value. But what does this allow? It allows for a new chaining method. Adding then, as well as a callback function, allows you to create a different linear process instead of the asynchronous way that JavaScript generally works within. Try it out. Where does this fit within your applications? Send us your accomplishments and who knows, you might be the next Web Byte. Remember, we can change the world one line of code at a time.